The Apostle Paul wrote this letter that was, well, so fiery, people have been arguing about it for thousands of years. In it, he makes this powerhouse argument that can feel a little dense at first. But stick with me here, because once you see the big picture he's painting, it unlocks this absolutely radical vision of what it means to be truly free. So Paul wraps up this whole intense section with this incredibly stark warning. He is not mincing words at all. He sees this very real danger that the believers in Galatia are about to willingly walk right back into a prison they were just set free from. And this right here is the central puzzle. I mean, think about it. The people arguing with Paul were telling these new non-Jewish Christians, hey, you need to follow the laws God gave in the Old Testament. On the surface, that sounds pretty reasonable, right? So why on earth does Paul frame that as going back to slavery? To answer that, we've got to zoom way out. To really get inside Paul's head, we can't just think about individual choices or personal morality. We have to try and see the world the way he saw it, as this massive cosmic battlefield. He's thinking in huge terms about ages, spiritual forces, and a drama that's playing out in heaven and on earth at the same time. Now, when we hear the word apocalyptic, our minds usually jump to, disaster movies and the end of the world. But for Paul, it's not really about the end of the physical world. It's about the end of an age. He saw all of history as this epic struggle between two competing realities, the present evil age and the new creation that God kicked off through Jesus. So who's running this present evil age? Well, Paul actually gives them a name, the stoichia. It's a Greek word that means something like the elemental things or the basic building blocks of the world. But for Paul, these aren't just abstract concepts. They are powerful, cosmic, spiritual beings that are holding the entire world in bondage. And just to be super clear, these aren't the same as the demons you might read about in the Gospels, the ones that affect a single person. The stoichia, in Paul's view, are playing a much, much bigger game. Think of them more like spiritual forces that oversee entire nations, that shape whole cultures, and that reinforce all the invisible rules that tell us who's in and who's out. So how do these powers actually work? Well, according to Pauline scholar Dr. Tim Gombis, one of the, you could call it a genius of evil, is its ability to take things that are genuinely good, even gifts from God, like the law given to Israel, and twist them, weaponize them into tools for division and control. And that's the key. These forces turn God's good law into a way to separate people, to create insiders and outsiders, and to keep everyone locked up in the present evil age. Okay, so if the whole world is enslaved to these cosmic forces, how could anyone possibly break free? Well, according to Paul, it wasn't something humanity could do on its own. It required a rescue mission of cosmic proportions. It required a divine invasion. This is so crucial to understanding Paul. The arrival of Jesus wasn't just about a great teacher showing up with some new moral ideas. Paul sees it as a dramatic, forceful, military-style action. God set his son directly into enemy territory, into a world system held captive by these hostile powers, for one specific purpose, to liberate it. This idea of an invasion is a really powerful way that a lot of modern scholars describe Paul's thinking. Christ doesn't enter the enslaved world as a polite guest. He comes as a conqueror, ready to free a captive people and pull them out of that old, broken reality and into something brand new. And what was the result of that invasion? Well, the death and resurrection of Jesus dealt a death blow to that old system. It shattered the authority of the stoichia, it broke their power, and it threw open the doors to a new reality, the new creation. A totally new way of being human and relating to God, completely free from those old powers. Okay, so Paul has just laid out this massive cosmic drama. It's huge. But how does he make this choice really clear and personal for the Galatians? He does something absolutely brilliant and super creative. He uses a famous story from their own scriptures as a powerful, imaginative allegory. He reaches all the way back to the story of Abraham and his two sons, one born to a slave woman, Hagar, and the other to a free woman, Sarah. Now, he's not trying to reinterpret what that original story meant. He's using its characters and its plot like a map to lay out the two choices, the two worlds that are standing right in front of the Galatians. Let's just break down how Paul builds this. It's really clever. On one side, in the slavery column, you've got Hagar, the slave woman. Paul connects her to her son Ishmael, to human effort, what he calls the flesh, and to the law that was given at Mount Sinai. And then, provocatively, he connects this whole path to the present Jerusalem. But on the other side, you have Sarah, the free woman. He associates her with her son Isaac, who was born not by human striving, but by a supernatural promise from God. This path is linked to the Spirit and to the Jerusalem above, which for him means the heavenly reality of the new creation. So after laying out these two columns, these two distinct paths, Paul delivers the punchline. He says that for a non-Jewish person to choose to live under the Old Testament law is to choose the path of Hagar. It's to choose the path of slavery. And his advice is severe, it's direct. Cast out the bondwoman and her son. In other words, reject that entire system. Okay, so Paul is talking a lot about freedom, but it is so important that we understand what he actually means by it, because his definition of freedom is probably profoundly different from our modern Western one. You know, our culture often defines freedom as the liberty to do anything I feel like, with no restrictions holding me back. But for Paul, freedom is primarily freedom from things. It's freedom from the tyranny of false identities, freedom from the crushing weight of what other people expect of you, and freedom from condemnation. So what does this actually look like? It's freedom from the toxic idea that you have to belong to one specific ethnic group to be right with God. It's freedom from all the judgment and comparison games that religious cultures can create. And, on the flip side, it's the freedom to join God's beautiful new multi-ethnic family, and the freedom to live a life that's actually guided by God's Spirit, not just by a long list of oppressive external rules. Dr. Gombis gives this brilliant modern analogy that just nails the core issue. He says telling a Gentile Christian they have to live like a Jewish Christian to be saved is like telling a Portuguese person they can only be saved if they become an American citizen and start celebrating the 4th of July. It's an enslaving message. Paul's vision is that God is glorified not when everyone becomes the same, but in a beautiful symphony of different nations and cultures, all united in Jesus. So when you boil it all down, Paul's big fight was against a system that loved sorting people into boxes, Jew, Gentile, slave, free. And he came along and declared that in Christ, all those boxes have been demolished, which leaves us with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? What are the boxes that our culture and maybe even our own religious subcultures try to force us into today? And what would it really look like to experience the kind of cosmic freedom Paul is talking about?